Our account has slowed down. So I think if we want to go ahead, we can start. So welcome. This is Belong at Brown, the application workshop for master's focused applications. My name is Bryce. I'm joined today by my colleague Holly, and she and I will be presenting shortly. Awesome. If we want to go to the next slide, please. All right, so we've got our agenda for the day. We're going to talk really in depth about every aspect of the application. So that is going to be most of our time. And then at the end, we are going to have a Q&A. If you do have questions, we ask that you submit them through the Q&A function at the bottom of your toolbar. And then we will answer those as we go. I've also got some colleagues in the back answering questions as well. We might hold some to the end if we feel like those are going to be good questions for everybody. So if we want to go to the next slide, I can hand it over to Holly and she will start with our application stuff.
Thanks, Bryce. Hi, everyone. I just want to introduce myself briefly. I am Holly Brennan. Me and Bryce hold the title of Graduate Recruitment Counselor here across all of our residential master's programs here at Brown. So if you want to go to the next slide, I do want to just kind of set the tone, as we did see a lot of questions submitted prior to registering for the session, and also just in general, we typically see a lot of interest in the PhD application process, and I just want to set the tone that we are only going to be talking about master's applications here. There is a small universe of people who might be applying to a PhD program and a master's program at Brown, so I just wanted to share some guidance here. There are some institutions that offer what we call an informal pathway of entering into a doctoral program as a master's student. That is not available at Brown, so typically those two application processes are separate in that if you want to be considered for both and a PhD program does not have what we call this referral process, you would be applying separately. So, for example, biotechnology, biomed, some of our other engineering programs that offer doctoral studies as well as masters, you'd be indicating your interest in being selected for the master's program in lieu of doctoral studies at your PhD application. If you have any questions about this, of course, you can contact the graduate school, which is the administrative unit that handles PhD applications and enrollment. Our team covers masters specifically. So if you want to go to the next slide, I want to just talk about kind of briefly about what our entire portfolio of residential programs looks like. And you'll see there are at least 3 programs that we offer that do not use Brown's master's application, and that is biostatistics, public health, and the MPA/MPH dual degree. We will be talking about a lot of transferable tips and advice about completing a master's application, but it will be limited to the Brown's master application and not the SOFIS application. So as you can see with our residential programs, we do have a heavy STEM interest as well as humanities and public health. As far as what we're looking at is really programs that are entirely on campus. So if you were looking at some of these programs, you might know that they also have options for online study. We are limited to talking about the on-campus, in-person programs and the application associated with that format. And for this entire presentation, of course, we tried to become as granular as possible, but we are also expecting that you are going to be doing your own research into the requirements of your program, and that we will not be able to answer each granular question, or even if you are qualified. We're really expecting at this point of your application process that you have determined what your prerequisite coursework is, and that you have determined that you are actually qualified to apply for this program. So if you have any questions about that, of course, we can talk offline, but if you are interested in one of these programs and you are sincerely interested in starting an application for fall 2026 entry, then we can continue on.
All right, so if we want to go to the next slide, then I can take over here. So let's talk a little bit about the application components. This is a really great screenshotable slide. This encompasses kind of everything that you could possibly expect that will be requested of you in your application. So our top components here with complete applications Your complete application is going to include your official transcripts. You may submit your unofficial transcripts, and the official ones are only required for enrolling students. So if you submit with your unofficial transcripts, if you are admitted, then you will need to supply us with your official transcripts before classes start. International transcripts do need to be evaluated by the WES, the ECE, the TEC, if they are from a non-US institution before enrollment. And then international transcripts also must be translated into English. We are also looking for your resume or your CV, a personal statement and or short answer questions, 3 letters of recommendations, typically unless you are a 5th-year student, which means you are a current Brown undergraduate currently and are applying for the 5th-year master's track, then you only need 2 and the application fee of $100. But for attendees of this session, if you are attending this session right now, then you will be given an application fee waiver that is valid for 1 program, as long as it is a non-SOFIS application that will be automatically applied to the account attached to the email that you are currently using in this Zoom room. If by chance you are applying using a different email, you can email us. I am going to put this email in the chat, masters_events@brown.edu. That will bring you directly to us, and we will be able to help you from there. And then some of the possible requirements depending on your program, because each program has a little bit different of an application. Some programs require the GRE or other standardized testings. Some require writing samples. There are a few that require very specific prerequisite coursework. Medical physics will ask for an interview. School of Engineering programs want to see video essays. And then we will, if you are not a native English speaker and have not attended a school where the entirety was taught in English, then we will need your English language proficiency exams. And we are going to be doing a deep dive into all of these different aspects. So hopefully we'll answer any questions that you might have, but if any other questions do come up, please feel free to add them into the Q&A. And just a really important note here is that all applications or all applicants must verify that they did not use any form of AI, including ChatGPT, on the written components of their application. That is something that we will be asking you to verify, so it is important to know that. If we want to go to the next slide, please. I wanted to talk a little bit about holistic review because we like to say, we take a holistic review of the applications, but what does that really mean? So this is more of a formal definition, a flexible, individualized way of assessing an applicant's capabilities by which balanced consideration is given to experience, attributes, metrics, and when considered in combination, how that individual might contribute value to the institution's missions and goals. So what we really mean is that when we see your application, we are looking at it kind of across the board. Outside of the English language proficiency exams, there's no one thing that's really going to make or break. We take it all into consideration. We want to see how you as a person are going to best kind of help your cohort be an asset to the program. Maybe you are connecting with someone in the faculty that has a similar research interest. There's a lot of things that go into how we review an application. So we just thought that that was something important to mention. And if we want to move to the next slide, then Holly can go into some of the things that we view for that application.
Yeah, thank you, Bryce. So in general, this question about academic readiness is a large factor of how we consider that you'll be ready for graduate level work. So to Bryce's point about a holistic review, we want to note that especially if you're coming straight out of undergraduate where your GPA was much more of a focus, especially on your qualifications or the programs that you would be qualified for based on your GPA. It is a really different animal when you're applying for master's and doctoral programs, and especially particularly with this new generation of people who have survived a pandemic. They have survived other geopolitical kind of factors that may have affected their academic performance, may have resulted in some gaps in their record, or taking time off to take care of a sick one or take care of their own sickness. So as far as academic readiness is concerned, there are multiple factors which we have highlighted here. So overall, we're looking at the trend within your grades and performance in your transcripts and not necessarily just the most recent semester or your best semester. It's looking at the overall trend. So of course, that is a lot more forgiving for people who, especially maybe you're a first generation college student who started their first semester, wholly unprepared, like many of us do. And I can say that too, honestly, because I was a first generation college student who had a really rough first semester. But that is not the be all end all of your academic readiness or how we determine that you'd be ready for graduate level work. So looking at your transcripts, making sure that you have made at least the minimum qualifications for prerequisite coursework, particularly, some of our higher volume programs like computer science and data science, they do have listed courses in statistics and understanding Python. And having more advanced computer science courses as a prerequisite to being admissible into the program. Some programs are a little more forgiving in that way, like social data analytics. They have a much more accepting pool of people with varying backgrounds in sociology and psychology with an overlap in some data science. But generally, especially if you're looking at programs that do have really specific prerequisite coursework, a lot of that focus is going to be how you performed in those classes because those classes are going to be really the principle of what you're going to be studying in your graduate level work, which is much more focus about training you to become an industry leader or to gain employment post graduation. As far as our programs that do require standardized tests, we're looking at how you performed on those tests. If it's not required, then that's, we'll talk about that actually in a couple slides about whether it's right to submit your GRE scores if a program isn't requiring it. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But in general, we're also looking at any awards that you received in undergraduate or for publication or research that you did. And this is all what we would consider academic readiness. We want to go to the next slide. We'll be talking a little bit about work and research experience. So typically, again, a large of our population of incoming students are coming right from undergraduate, but we are also launching new programs and also becoming more forgiving for mid-career professionals who have been gaining industry or hands-on experience and have graduated from undergrad, maybe, past 3 or 4 years, past the kind of normal timeline that we see with people coming straight out of undergraduate. So as much as your program may not have a firm requirement of work or industry experience, we always recommend highlighting it if you have it. So especially if you worked as a TA or a graduate assistant for one of your professors, or you engaged in research, extracurricular activities, and also volunteer options, is that this would be a really great opportunity to put that in your resume and to highlight all of the exciting things that you do beyond just being a student and also professionally. And I just want to pause here to see if there's any questions in the chat regarding these slides and see if I can answer them. Um, hmm. Some of these questions are going to be covered, I guess, in our some future slides. So I just want to name that too, is that if you're not getting answers right now, that's probably going to be covered in a future slide. No, I think that we can continue moving on.
Awesome. So then I can look at our letters of reference. So these letters are going to give a detailed, factual, and candid eval of your capabilities within the context of graduate school. So this is not a character reference. It is something where maybe a instructor or a research supervisor or someone who has supervised you within relevant professional work can speak to your skills in regards to graduate school and how you are going to succeed. So we do request 3 letters of recommendation for most of our programs, and most programs request at least one from an academic instructor. Some prefer two, but we also understand that it may have been a few years since you have been in an academic environment. So if it has been more than 5 years since you have been in academia, then usually we will waive that request of one academic reference. These are really great examples of how you learn. This is what faculty members are looking at to see how does this person learn, how does this person use what they have learned, and how do they apply it and then continue to grow from there. Um, a strong letter is better than a vague one. Do they know you well enough? You want to pick someone who knows you really well. You may have been in a 100-person lecture class and only kind of get to know one professor and they can only really speak to your grades. That's not going to be a great reference. Someone who really knows you and has really seen how you learn and has helped you along the way, that's going to be a really great reference. We're not looking for family or friends as recommenders. We're again really looking for supervisors, advisors, mentors, instructors, someone who has been there to teach you and see how you learn. And then they can speak on what your academic capabilities are going to be in graduate school. If we want to go to the next slide, please. Awesome. We can look at our personal statement or statement of purpose. The programs will ask, depending on your program, it might be a statement of purpose, it might be a personal statement. But for the most part, these are going to be narratives that summarize your desire to study within your program of interest or your field. It's going to be a balanced blend of kind of highlighting your personal and your professional reasons for pursuing. Something that I like to advise is think past, present, future. So starting with past, how did you get into this subject? How did you get interested in it? Where did your motivations start? And then what are you doing now? Now you want to apply for graduate school. That's great. What work are you doing? What do you think you bring to the program? And then what do you want to do afterwards? What is this program going to help you reach? What goals do you have, short term, long term? Kind of tying it all together with your experience, your goals, and your motivations. So tying in your specific goals, looking into your program, really do research into your program. Really look at what courses they offer, what research tracks are available, what are the faculty members researching and interested in. Tie that into your own interests. If you find a faculty member where your interests kind of align, you can highlight that here as well. And then including your experience and motivations. So what are you bringing to the cohort? What are you bringing to the program? What do you already know? What experiences have you had within context of the field? And then how do they fit with the program? And then another just important note is that this is a writing sample. So we want to be sure that it's clear and free of any grammatical or spelling errors. And it should be at a graduate level writing. Awesome. I'm just going to check the Q&A and see if there are any questions about letters of rec or the personal statement. Should the personal statement briefly synthesize experiences or mainly on your fit with Brown? It should be both. So I know that you're a little worried about repeating earlier content or in your maybe resume. It can be both. We like to see how you're tying things in. Make your application is your story. So they should all somewhat be connected. But you can include new material as well. This is also kind of how we get to know you as a person. So adding maybe a little bit about, how do you research and how do you learn and what kind of cohort member, what kind of classmate are you? That can be included here too. Awesome. If we want to go to the next slide, I'll hand it back to Holly.
Thanks, Bryce. I did have few questions here that I wanted to pause. Typically, if your personal statement for your program, they will be giving you a rough guideline about how many words or how much space they are looking for. Some programs are also a little bit more I'll say lenient with that, but I think really the focus should be on answering the prompt. And if you are answering the prompt, you are typically going to be within that word limit. So as much as also, word limits are not necessarily being watched or monitored. So if you're over it, like you're automatically disqualified. It's more about a guideline of this is what a typical personal statement length is going to be. And if you answer the prompt with enough juice, then you should be able to cover at least more than a full page. And if it's under a page, it looks a little vague and a little neutral. So I'll say that a lot of your graduate finder pages are going to show also, and within the application, they will show the kind of guidelines from the program about how long they want your personal statement to be. Um, Yeah, and there's also some granular questions here about like when we bring up about faculty members that you want to talk about in your personal statement. It doesn't have to be necessarily current research. It just has to be contextually appropriate and relevant to why you want to study the program. As far as standardized testing goes, we did have another really easily screenshotable slide of our breakdown of programs that do require the GRE and the ones that do not, and ones that are kind of in the middle of accepting scores as another useful tool to gauging your candidacy for your given program. Some of those programs like computer science, health informatics, public affairs, some are more high volume and rigorous programs. That would be an opportunity if you did have kind of a lower GPA or lower academic performance and you did really well on the GRE. That would be a really great opportunity to boost your application. But again, if it is not a hard requirement to submit the GRE scores or any standardized testing, it will not look badly on your application if you got just a so-so score. So that's a matter of discretion that we are empowering you to kind of decide on. If it's a great score, then submit it. But if not, then I wouldn't submit it. As far as, sorry, I'm just seeing some questions popping up here. Hmm. Okay, I think we can go on to the next slide. As far as English language testing requirements are concerned, this is another question that we get a lot too, and I respect it from an international student standpoint. Starting the process of applying for graduate school, especially if you've never visited America or had taken undergraduate classes in America, that it can be a little daunting. Fortunately, a lot of this information is available online on a number of different websites. So we have this list of exempt countries that if you are a student or a person from and you obtained a degree from these countries, then you are automatically exempt from having to submit English language testing requirements in the form of the TOEFL or the IELTS. Some of our competitor institutions do accept Duolingo. Unfortunately, we do not. So we would only be able to accept official scores from the TOEFL or IELTS platforms. And we are also asking for those scores to be at least 2 years old. And if any older, then we're going to ask you to retake the test and submit a newer score. Typically, your English language proficiency and any sort of language proficiency improves the more that you practice it. So if we see a score that's over 2 years old, we are going to assume that you're probably going to do better by taking a sooner test. With that being said, that minimum is set at a university standard of 90 for the TOEFL and 7 for the IELTS, but there are a number of programs who list it in the application directly or even on their website really clear in kind language about maybe withholding your submission of your application if you do not meet their program minimums for the TOEFL or IELTS. Some of these programs that I've just listed here, but also is not only limited to the ones on this slide, namely computer science, cybersecurity, and biotechnology, right in the application where you're about to submit your official scores. They have it in really clear language that that is their minimum. And if you do not meet that, then your application submission is not encouraged. With that being said, we obviously want to make sure that you are a successful graduate student here and English language, and one, to ensure that English language is not going to be a barrier in your graduate studies. And So if you had questions about minimums or you're unsure of where to find that information, you can always email us post this session. But in general, there is a lot of really clear language on multiple websites that show what the minimums are and the kind of areas that you should be. In general, there's a reason why we set a university standard is to make sure that everyone has a chance to be successful in graduate school without English language being a barrier. So required if your native language is not English and you will not or did not receive a degree from an institution where the sole language of instruction is in English, and inclusion with these exempt countries. So uh, again, a really common question. I graduated from the UK, but my native language is not English. Am I required to submit the TOEFL or IELTS? No. If you are answering these prompts in the application correctly and accurately, the application will automatically let you know if you are required to submit the TOEFL or the IELTS. We do not have a waiver process with that. So if you do not meet, the logic in the application to be exempt, then you'll be required to submit. Again, there is no waiver process for any of our application requirements, but particularly the English language testing ones, which is a policy set by the graduate school. And also listed in the application, but for convenience here, our school code is listed here, 3094 in the bottom right-hand screen. So I'm just going to pause here to see if we have any questions. I am going to put in our application deadlines page where you can see the deadlines for each program, because it is a little different for potentially if you're an international student or depending on the program that you're interested in. A lot of these deadlines and credits are going to be particular to your program. So let me just get this link here and I'm going to put it in the chat. And also, I respect a lot of international folks are asking about GPA calculators. That is all done behind the scenes and also in ways that we can convert it to the US standard grading system, so you don't have to worry about that either. Okay, I think we can go on to the next slide, and I'll pass it back to Bryce.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the video essays. I know this can create a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. But one of the most important things is to just go in confident. Don't aim for perfection. The questions, they're not there to trick you. They're not there to be intentionally really hard, or you don't need to do heavy preparation for them. It's really just so the programs can see how you think on the spot, and how you'll answer those questions in your own way. There is not an option for a redo, which is just an important note. Usually they are anywhere from like 2 minutes to 30 seconds, I believe, for your answers. They will be part of your application. So as you're going, if you don't want to do your video essay right then and there, you don't have to. You can take a step back, log out, take a breather, and then when you are prepared for them, you can go in and click next on your application, and then you can go ahead and start your video essay. Something to note with, I know, go in confident. That doesn't really give you much. Just know that we're all rooting for you behind the scenes. We're all on your side. We're all wanting you to do a really good job. And we just want to learn more about you. We want to, know you as a person is really what we're looking for here. So that is kind of what we have about the video essays. They're not super common. Not a lot of our programs ask for them, but a couple of them do. And if you do have any other questions about, the video essays or really any other aspect of the application, that email that I put in the chat, the masters_events@brown.edu, that's how to connect with Holly and I. So you can always email us there too, and we can kind of walk you through more of that process. If we want to go to the next slide, please. Awesome. So let's go over some common mistakes that we see in the application. One of our pro tips that Holly will cover in a minute is really keeping track of deadlines. and make sure you're following up with recommenders. One of the questions that I saw earlier was when are letters of rec due? They are due at the same time your program's deadline is. So be sure that you might have gotten all your work done, you've submitted your application early, but we're still waiting on those letters of recommendation. So one of our good practices is make sure you're following up with those recommenders. I know that even my personal recommender got that letter in at like the last deadline, and I know how stressful that is. So definitely be sure you're following up with your recommenders. Make sure that they know when they're going to get, the form to fill out. They know when it's due. They know when you're submitting your things. Something that's really helpful is to have your application ready. And so they get to view your application and they can see what exactly you're trying to highlight. You can tell them what you want to highlight as well. If you have an experience with one of your recommenders that you think would really shine in your application, you can tell them, I would like you to highlight this particular experience. Um, and they can do that. The next one is lack of research in your program of interest and the specific requirements, which kind of ties into the next point as well. Um, in your personal statement, sometimes we see statements that are really broad. They might have been copied and pasted from other programs, and they'll say, I'm really excited about applying to XYZ University, and it's not Brown University. And while that won't be super negative, it's always kind of a oh moment. So make sure that you're really looking into your program of interest, look into the coursework, look into the faculty, say, this is why I'm interested in this specific program. This is why I'm interested in this course, and this class is really going to push me to learn these skills that I need to reach my specific goals. So make sure you're really looking into what you're applying to, and you know what you're applying for, and you know how you're going to use it. And then submitting at the edge of a deadline, we recommend applying as soon as possible because a lot of our programs have rolling admission. And what that means is they will look at an application as it comes in and make that decision and then release it within a few weeks. If you wait to the end of the deadline, there's other applications that have come in before yours, and they may have filled those positions within the class already. So submitting as soon as you can, and then that will also help in the future when it comes to enrolling for classes, looking for housing, signing up for things around the school. So submitting early is the best practice there. All right, next slide, please. Awesome, and I'll pass it back to Holly.
Thanks, Bryce. I just want to pause for a second here and answer some questions live. So I am interested in the non-thesis professional track. Should we state in our statement of purpose that we only want to do the coursework option and not a thesis? So this question is getting at some programs that might offer different tracks. Additionally, should we write a statement of purpose for the coursework track since we will not be talking about faculty and research? How do we answer why us? Should we talk about courses? That's a really great question. So I think that depending on the program that you're interested in, a lot of our STEM programs like biotech and biomed, they do offer non-thesis tracks where you are not doing research. It's more discussion based and more classroom based. I think that it would be a really great opportunity to talk about courses that you're interested in. Most of our programs specific webinars and most of our programs websites are going to be showing you the vast array of courses that you can take that are either required as part of the curriculum or that are a little bit more open and free to kind of design your own curriculum. So if you are not doing a thesis track, I think that would be a really great opportunity to say, hey, these are the classes that I'm really interested in. They really align with what I want to do post-graduation. And I think that would also still be an opportunity to talk about some faculty that are, leading these classes that even if they're not doing, you're not doing research or interested in doing research, that you're still looking at the faculty in each program and saying, they're hosting classes or they're teaching material that I'm interested in. So obviously you want to come from like an authentic space. And if you are not truly interested, then I think that would not be a great use of space in your personal statement. But yes, I think that the entire kind of nature of the prompt saying, what are your goals post-graduation? Talking about the coursework, talking about the specific curriculum of the program that you're looking at shows true direct interest in this program and not just any master's degree, but why the one at Brown is right for you. Some of our programs really are niche and are special and offer elements that are unavailable at some of our partner institutions. So that's also why, to Bryce's point in our previous slide about personal statements that are kind of shared across a number of programs, that it's clear that if you haven't done direct research into Brown's program, it's going to be clear because we know how niche and how unique they are. And if you did do that research, you'd be able to talk about that or at least express curiosity and interest in your personal statement about that. And I'm getting a lot of questions about AI, which is something that, we haven't, prior to this year, have mentioned in the application that you need to agree to not use AI in any which way or form in any part of your application. That is as clear as it's going to get. I think that if you are agreeing to submit an application to Brown, you are saying that you did not use AI or ChatGPT in any part of the process at all, and especially your writing sample. So if that is required. Any questions about that? I'm happy to answer again, but I think that, and I respect the question because um, there's a lot of use for AI that I think that is appropriate, but when you're talking about your own experience and talking about graduate level coursework, being able to confirm that you used your own words, your own critical thinking skills to deliver a piece of writing from your own brain is going to show that you're ready for graduate level coursework. If you are unable to do that and you're relying too much on AI, it is showing that you are not prepared for graduate level writing or coursework. So these are kind of our pro tips that I think that with everything that we've mentioned, can really be simplified in some of these really short kind of anecdotes. Keeping track of deadlines, especially if you're applying to multiple programs and multiple programs at Brown, you might notice that the deadlines vary pretty widely and that our deadlines do not always align with some of our competitor institutions. With that being said, too, deadlines are there to ensure that we can get your application decision as soon as possible. So some of our deadlines might be priority deadlines, which means that you'd be the first group of applicants to receive an admissions decision, or you might be part of a program that is offering rolling admissions, which means the earlier that you submit, the earlier that you receive a decision. As far as providing context, there is an opportunity in the application under the personal statement. It gives you 300 words about providing academic context to that is not otherwise available to understand either in your personal statement or just looking at metrics and looking at like the trend of your grades. Brown, I think, is unique in this sense, and I get this anecdote from some applicants that we recruit and that we are advising is that Brown is a little quirky. We know that we get the name Quirky Ivy for a reason, but also because our environment really is collaborative and it really is holistic and caring about you as a person. These classes and these cohorts, they may be growing, but they are still really small. And the attention to students and that faculty to student ratio is really tiny and amazing for a graduate program. But I think that providing context where you can talk a little bit more about your personhood, a little bit more about you as a whole is going to help the admissions committee, particularly if you're an international student, particularly if you're a first generation student, particularly if you've ever had to, struggled with any health issues or had a family situation that impacted your academic performance, there's an opportunity in the application to provide that. Obviously not wanting to focus entirely on that, which is why they do have a word limit within that academic context box, which is 300 words. And anything more than that, as long as it's appropriate and you use it kind of with your best discretion, you might be able to elaborate about that a little bit more in your personal statement. And overall, of course, we are not expecting any applicant or application to be perfect. We have a lot of high achievers here, and especially people who are very smart and motivated individuals, and we love to see it. But also, applying to master's programs is a really different animal than applying to undergraduate here. Brown has a reputation for their undergraduate programs being extremely hard to get into. We're looking at just two really different demographics. Our master's population is about 3,000 students. So we get, a quarter of the applications that our undergrads do. And I think that it's a lot more forgiving for lower GPAs, for non-perfect scores, and non-perfect performances. So I know a number of programs that have admitted students under a 3.0 GPA, given that they have, improved on whatever circumstance kind of led to that lower academic performance. And in all, of course, we understand that trying to determine the best fit for a program isn't always really possible by only doing your own research, which is why Bryce and I, part of our function is to help you find the best fit and also provide, authentic kind of advice on if your qualifications or if your kind of like current standing is going to be strong enough for admission into a program. So we would love to talk offline about that. We host, I think we can go to the next slide that might show.
I've got that link. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Bryce. Yeah, so in our application advising, I do see actually some names of people who have either attended a session with me and Bryce or have signed up for one for office hours, but we have a number of different opportunities to talk a little bit more individually about your application if you'd like. Through a one-on-one appointment, you do not need to make an appointment to email us. I understand that we're all busy and also want to be accommodating towards people in different time zones. You can always just defer to email. This masters_events at brown.edu is manned by basically me and Bryce. So it's just us. It's not like a massive inbox that's being dealt with by like 10 different people. It's really just me and Bryce. So you'd probably just get a reply from one of our personal emails, but I would also going to put my personal email in the chat here to chat offline. And also just want to do a really quick plug of some upcoming events that our team is hosting. That is a great opportunity to get some more in-depth information about student life or about budgeting in grad school and about the professional development and career services opportunities that you have as a student here. So I think Bryce just put that link in the chat. Where you can register for, but next week we are hosting a Meet a Master student event where we are going to have 11 programs represented. So even if your program isn't represented, it's a really great opportunity to just kind of virtually meet and greet with some master students and get their perspective on student life. So I think that with that being said, we could probably start tackling the Q&A. I know we have about 15 minutes left, and thank you so much for my colleagues in the background and for your patience in answering. We do have a pretty high volume session here with some questions, so if we can't answer them all, we can always take this conversation offline, but we have some great questions here, so I just want to pause and see where we can start answering them. We want to go to the next slide, Emma? Okay.
I think we should start at the top.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. This first one, there's a prompt asking to describe an aspect of your background and how do you feel it would contribute to your academics program and to the Brown community? How should I approach this? Oh, how should I approach answering this prompt compared to the personal statement? I think that the advice that I would give is this seems like a more of a opportunity to talk about your background and your personality and your personal things that maybe have happened in your life that maybe don't align exactly with academia, but may have contributed to your motivation to be in this program, in this field. So that, and then the personal statement is really more, how do I tie it all into academia? So yeah, I think that background prompt is more of a this is who I am personally, and the personal statement is this is how my personal experiences have driven me to study this field. Holly, do you have a different answer for that or anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that is perfect, Bryce.
Okay.
I did see a question that I just answered real quick, but it's a question about submitting materials basically that are not required. So some of our programs are requiring some video essays, and some of them aren't. I had a question that was like, what if I submit a video essay? Will this help me stand out? I love where your head's at, and I love that eagerness, but I think that wouldn't really be appropriate. If you were looking at the requirements for the program and it's not requiring a video essay, I just wouldn't submit it. The video essay is built into the application, so I'd be confused about how you would even attach that to the application, but I wouldn't even worry about it. I would focus on what is truly required and meeting that exactly. Additionally, there are some questions, and I respect this too, with looking at doctoral programs. Some of those personal statements, you are noting that you want to be considered for graduate assistantships or for on-campus job opportunities. This isn't really an opportunity in the application to be advocating for those kind of opportunities. So we won't be covering on-campus job opportunities in this session, but we will be talking about that a little bit in our budgeting session and who would be qualified for on-campus job opportunities and what those typically look like each year. Um,
Oh, that's a great question. Will Grammarly be flagged as using I don't believe so. Um, but I'm not actually totally sure, Holly.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, Grammarly. Will Grammarly use be flagged as using I don't think it's AI. From the best of my knowledge, Grammarly corrects grammar and might provide some help with sentence structure. Um, but I believe Grammarly should be an acceptable tool.
I think it should be acceptable as well. Yes. Grammarly is more about grammar instead of actually formulating sentences that were not there previously. And I did see an anonymous participant question this. I write my own words, but it's detected as AI generated. How can I fix this? I'm not sure about that. I mean, our application isn't going to flag it as being potentially AI. So you're not going to see that in ours. But not sure how to answer that actually. I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah, I don't believe we put it through anything. So I think that as long as you're verifying that it's not AI, then that's the step that we just need on your application.
And of course, we can also talk offline a little bit more about rolling admissions. I know
Mhm.
off the top I had some of our programs that do offer them and some of them that are not quite ready to decide on when they're releasing decisions. Typically, early March is when we give the kind of like typical timeline. Public humanities is not a rolling admissions. However, it is a small cohort, so all admissions decisions would be released really all at once, probably in mid-February because that deadline is January 15th. I'm going to be kindly dismissing questions about PhDs because I want to give the floor to master's applicants here.
Okay. Oh, I have someone in here. They joined this with an email that's not linked to their application email. Yes, if you reach out to the email that's in the chat, masters_events@brown.edu, we can get that application fee waiver moved to the right account.
I see that Victoria is typing an answer here, but I would love to address it to the whole group. Or if we are thinking of applying, how soon should we reach out to faculty? Typically, faculty are really interested in speaking to admitted students. So especially at the kind of prospect level stage, they are going to be inundated with kind of inquiries and people who interest might be a little vague or it might be a little neutral. So they really love to make connections with students once they're admitted and once they're deciding to enroll or not. So typically that's going to be happening upon receiving your admissions decision and attending any of our admitted student webinars where you can meet and greet with the program in a little bit more of an intimate way than these kind of webinar styles or the information sessions. And
There
this
was
is
one. Oh, go ahead.
I did have a question here that caters a little bit more to our mid-career or later career professionals. I graduated from a College of Engineering, but I've been working with experience for over 20 years. I'm interested in the residential MS engineering program. I want to confirm if all ages are accepted. Yes, absolutely. All ages are accepted. We do not discriminate based on age here, and especially considering the kind of nature of some of these industries is that more people are coming with industry knowledge and wanting to go back to school for more technical training. So that is definitely not a disadvantage at all. Um, we accept all ages.
Um, so the one that I'm typing up, I'll just say out loud. From Liliana, I'm an international student. An undergrad experience is different from the US in your country. Not many incentives to research or options for extracurricular. How does this impact my application? And should I mention it as a weakness? I don't consider it a weakness. I consider that as just part of your experience. Um, I think as long as you have, the requirements there and you're able to speak to, your motivations, any experience you've done in the classroom, any projects you were really proud of, anything like that will also be considered in your personal statement. And I think that that would definitely meet the requirement lines that we're looking for.
I think if you have any questions about the rolling admission for programs, we can talk offline about that. I want to really focus on the kind of nuts and bolts of the application and less about deadlines if we can. And also, I meant to mention about the letters of recommendation. If you are looking at PhDs, you're going to be using probably a platform like Interfolio, but with the master's application, your recommenders are going to get an email from our Brown system asking to submit a recommendation on your behalf through our application system. So Interfolio will not be involved at all. It'll be sent third party through Brown.
There's a question here. Does it make sense to mention in my essay that I plan to pursue a PhD in the future? I'm wondering because I feel that the master's program is more career oriented. While we don't have a direct master's to PhD pathway, that's absolutely something you can mention in your essay. Um, any of your personal goals are definitely welcome if that is what's connecting to the program. If you want to use this program as a stepping stone to your PhD, then that's totally acceptable and definitely something that you can mention. Um, oh,
Um,
how fast do we have to accept or decline? Oh, I think someone just answered that. See.
I accidentally dismissed
Oh.
it. So the enrollment deadline is going to be a little bit more consistent across our programs. So typically that's going to be April 15th or May 1st. And that is really the formal kind of decision making timeline of if you need to accept your admission or not. It is a little different if you are admitted on a wait list. You have less runway and a little bit less time to decide. So if you're admitted off a wait list, those are typically a shorter timeline. And I think that this has been mentioned, but I'd love to just kind of repeat it again, is that only completed applications can be reviewed. So if we are missing one single part of your application, it is considered incomplete and ineligible for review. So I've gotten this question a few times, especially from eager people wanting their decision sooner. Can you please, review my application as it's incomplete? No, we cannot. So if that's why we talk about deadlines and making sure that you are completely informed and organized about that, because while there might be some internal leeway with getting some missing materials post the deadline, is that after a certain point, that kind of flexibility is not granted. So we are looking for you to have your completed application and your letters of recommendation and your transcripts and everything by the application deadline. Again, there is some internal leeway with that, but the general guidance is to have all your completed applications by that named deadline. As far as applying for scholarships, typically a lot of our programs are already going to be considering you for need-based or merit-based, depending on the nature of their scholarship funding. So typically there's not another extra step involved other than potentially applying for the FAFSA or the CSS profile. But I would love to chat offline a little bit more about program-specific scholarships.
One of the questions in here, do you have recommendations for how to ensure our recommenders speak to our qualifications and strengths without crossing the line and telling them what to write about? I don't believe that's crossing the line. I think that you can speak really candidly with your recommenders. You can provide them with your personal statement and your resume. Say that you worked with one of them directly on a project that you were really proud of. Say, you can tell them, I would really like for you to write about this. You don't have to tell them, write these exact sentences, but say, if you could speak to this strength, this skill, and this opportunity that you had to see me kind of exemplify this, then I would really appreciate that. So you can tell them, these are the qualifications and skills that I really want to highlight in these letters, and that is totally acceptable. Um, Hmm. Got a couple of questions in here asking about what distinguishes an excellent personal statement, what particular qualities might make it exceptional or stand out. Um, I think that the pro tip that I always give, that I did give on the slide, is think past, present, future, and tie it together. Tie in your interests and your goals with what you're expecting to get from this program. Um, and tying those in and showing that you already have kind of that baseline. You had your base undergraduate experience or maybe professional experience that has pushed you to get this degree. Sharing what you know and sharing what you've done, anything impressive that you might have already done, that's great to add to your personal statement. If you're really just looking to use these as like your stepping stones to your career, to your PhD, share what you want out of this program in your personal statement and what you're hoping to get. And those typically stand out. If you can show that you know what you're talking about and you know what you want, then those are what I have seen the really good ones. Holly, do you have any other?
Yeah, I think what really helps it stand out, and I think people are coming from maybe like, do I talk more creatively, a little bit more autobiographically about my experience? I think that, especially with programs that have specific prompts, I'll say that answering the prompt is really important. So it's maybe less about having like a really pretty or creative writing sample or something that really stands out. Is that something that actually answers the prompt and says that you read it and understand it? So I think that I know that sounds like really simple and like low-hanging fruit, but we do get a lot of people that just don't read the prompt or aren't really rereading their own work and aren't catching their own mistakes. So a written, a personal statement that is written really well and that is easy to understand, that is free of errors and spelling or grammar stands out because it looks like graduate level work. Not necessarily like the nature of your personal story, it's the nature of your writing. Oh, another really good question that I want to answer live. And this is kind of in the same tandem of people submitting requirements or submitting additional materials that might help boost their application, namely in the form of like 4 letters of recommendation. You only have the opportunity to select 3, so 4 is not an option. And also because after meeting the requirements of your program, anything additionally on top of that is not going to sway the admissions committee anymore. I think that if you have a fourth letter recommendation, you should be considering on if one of the other recommendations are not strong enough, and to really focus on the strength of the ones that you have and only picking the ones that are the strongest. So if you're in between, like the third or fourth, really leaning on the one that's the strongest and can speak to your strengths more.
Okay. I just want to mention that since we are running out of time, this session was recorded. We will be sending a recording via email within the next few days. We also have a survey after the session. Once the session closes, that will pop up. It's just a minute. It's just a couple multiple choice questions saying how you enjoyed today's session. Was it helpful? Those responses are really helpful for us. So if you fill that up, we really appreciate it. And again, our email is masters_events@Brown. It is in the chat. If you have any other questions that we didn't get to today, please reach out to us and we will do our best.
The last note that I do want to say, and this is a reason why we also say that you should not be using AI or any sort of additional assistance like that when completing your application, is because real live people are reading your application. We do not have a system that automatically filters poor applications based on an algorithm. Every completed application is read by a real person, by a real faculty member, by a seasonal reader. There is no filtering process. So you can use technical terminology, especially for some of our more STEM programs like engineering, and when we're talking about like computer science, which can get very technical. So the more technical, obviously, the better. You're talking about an Ivy League institution with doctoral, people who have studied PhDs, who have been in industry for 20, 30 years. So a question of it being too technical is not appropriate, because you're dealing with people who have experience with being highly technical. So with that being said, thank you, Bryce, for your collaboration with this session, and thank you all for joining. We're so happy to provide as best advice and recruitment policies and pro tips as we can. We can also continue this conversation offline, as Bryce mentioned. So just want to say warm thank you all for joining, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks all.
Take care, everyone. Bye.